Good morning, Cornerstone, and happy Monday. I wanted to follow up a little bit from yesterday's sermon for today's inspirational vitamin and discuss what I'd call the final thoughts of Jesus. So, over in Matthew chapter 27 and verse 46, and Mark records the exact same event in Mark chapter 15 and verse 34. It says this. About the ninth hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And as we looked at yesterday, Jesus was actually reciting the first verse of Psalm 22. Well, a couple of verses later in Matthew and Mark, after making this statement, the people there think that Jesus is calling for Elijah, and they run a sponge and fill it and give him something to drink, and they're like, let's wait to see if Elijah comes to save him. But right after that, a couple verses later, it says, and Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Well, one of the things that is so amazing is that we have four gospels, and we get different insights from the different writers. And so all Matthew and Mark both talk about Jesus crying out, this first verse of Psalm 22 and verse 1. Luke doesn't record that, but he does give us details on what that last cry of Jesus was. So over in Luke chapter 23 and verse 46, it says this, and Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. Having said this, he breathed his last. And so, one of the final questions, Jesus asked a lot of questions in his life. But one of the final questions that Jesus asks is, to God, or he's really crying out, I think, for the benefit of his listeners, but also just trying to show what was going through his mind and through his thoughts and his heart. My God, why have you forsaken me? And so that was Psalm chapter 22 and verse 1. And if you read that psalm, it's a psalm that starts off with a cry of anguish, but ends with a resounding voice of hope and triumph. And Jesus' very last cry, as Luke records it, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit, is actually from Psalm chapter 31 and verse 5. And so one of the things I challenge the congregation to really look at this week are, what are all the things that occur between Psalm 22 verse 1 and Psalm 31 and verse 5? And so my inspirational vitamin today is, I'd love for you to dive into on your own, looking at what were sort of the sort of things that were going through Jesus's mind in his final thoughts. Because if he's reciting Psalm 22 verse 1, and then his life ends with, on his lips, Psalm 31 and verse 5, we can sort of reason that, in his brain, he's thinking about everything that happened in those Psalms, or all the things that were written from Psalm 22 to Psalm 31. And so one of the things I'd like to put before you is that Jesus was thinking about the joy of his resurrection. Jesus was thinking about how he was going to be vindicated, how God is a good shepherd, how God is the light of his life and his salvation. I mean, if you go and read through those Psalms from 22 to 31, you'll see that these are pretty much all Psalms of joy, of faith in God, of trust that God will deliver me. And so I'd encourage you to do that today. Get a little bit more than just a vitamin. Maybe get a spiritual meal this week by looking through Psalm 22 verse 1 all the way to Psalm 31 and verse 5. And try to experience the joy, the faith, the hope, the love, the trust that Jesus had in God. Let's try to put our faith, hope, trust, and love in our Father, in our Heavenly Father as well. So that's the inspirational vitamin. Have a great week, Cornerstone.